Hey travelers, Mag and FlCrafters out here on another geocaching adventure exploring the island of Oahu. This one is a very special location for both of us. This is the Punchbowl, the National Cemetery in Oahu. This is where all of our honored dead have come to rest after the Great War and World War II and other wars as well. This is a very special place to me as a Marine Corps veteran, but even more special to our retired Major, FlCrafters, who served how long in the Marine Corps?
26 and a half.
26 and a half years she has served. And in that time, how many deployments did you have? 8 deployments. That was Iraq and Afghanistan?
Yes. And then before that, Desert Storm and all that.
So as you can see, she has a Marine Corps history going way back before I do. And she is tied to a lot of the places that we're going to see in here through the cemetery, so I'm very honored to be able to have this chance to tour the cemetery with her. So let's get in there and tour the Punchbowl together. Come on, let's go. The National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific was established in 1949 and is more often referred to as the Punchbowl Cemetery. It serves as a memorial to honor the men and women who have served in the United States Armed Forces and those killed in action. It provides the final resting place for nearly 53,000 veterans and their eligible family members. There are numerous Medal of Honor recipients recognized here, including Private Irwin J. Boydston, who is recognized for his actions in Peking, China in 1900 during the Boxer Rebellion. Chief Boatswain Edwin Joseph Hill, who released the moorings from the USS Nevada, allowing it to be the only battleship to escape the harbor during the attack. And Staff Sergeant Edward Kaneshiro, who during the war in Vietnam single-handedly took on a unit of ambushing North Vietnamese soldiers, armed merely with a rifle and 6 grenades. There are also many other notable historical figures here, including John Burns, former governor of the state of Hawaii, Ellison Onizuka, one of the 7 crew members of the ill-fated Shuttle Challenger that exploded on liftoff on January 28 of 1986, and Norman Keith Collins, better known as Sailor Jerry, a legendary tattoo artist renowned for his advancements in sterilization and his development of pigments. He is celebrated each June at the festival here in Oahu, and any one of them with a tale so fantastic that it would be worthy of its own movie. And those are just the tip of the iceberg for the tens of thousands of stories to be told of the American heroes buried here. It's impossible to take a trip through this national cemetery without feeling humbled by the weight of duty, courage, and sacrifice around you. And of course, no geocaching tour is complete without a geocache, am I right? And we got a pretty big one here at the National Cemetery too. Doesn't sound like there's much inside. Let's have a look. Got this big old container for a film can inside, and that's really what our geocache is. So, regular, micro, you decide. So why exactly is the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific known as the Punchbowl? There are actually several answers to this question, with the first dating back nearly 75,000 years to a period of intense volcanic activity here on the island of Oahu. Hot lava ejecting through old coral reefs formed into the shape of a crater that is often recognized as the shape of a punch bowl. Its Hawaiian name, Puawena, translates as the Hill of Sacrifice, which may not mean what you think it does at first glance. Instead, Puawena relates the original history of the crater long before it became the national cemetery we know today. During its first known use, there were 4 He'a, Hawaiian temples, which wrapped around the northeast slope facing the shore. The religious leaders of the time used it as an altar to sacrifice humans to the pagan gods and kill any who violated ancient laws and taboos. The Hill of Sacrifice would not begin to take on an alternate meaning until the first interment on January 4th of 1949. As far back as 60 years prior to this first interment in the 1890s, it had already been proposed as the site for a new cemetery in Honolulu. At the time, though, the idea had quickly been dismissed due to the stigma of creating a city of the dead above a city of the living. The idea would not gain traction again for another 50 years until, in 1943, the governor of Hawaii offered up the Punchbowl for the purposes of establishing a national cemetery. Although $50,000 had been appropriated to the project, it proved to be not nearly enough until the war dead of World War II began stacking up. The remains of thousands of service members had been shipped to Guam, awaiting permanent burial, with Congress and many veterans organizations exerting pressure on the military to find a solution to the problem. With the opening of the National Cemetery, the remains of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines from around the Pacific Theater, including Wake Island and Japanese POW camps, could finally find their final resting place here in Hawaii. The cemetery would officially open to the public on July 19th of 1949 with a service for 5 war dead, an unknown serviceman, 2 Marines, an Army lieutenant, and 1 civilian, Ernie Pyle. Though not a combatant himself, he had more than earned a place among the honored dead, living, eating, sleeping, and breathing the war in the trenches with the soldiers during World War II. As a journalist, his informal writing style helped to give a face and voice to the common soldiers fighting the war. His hard-hitting, down-to-earth columns were published in more than 400 daily newspapers across the nation, winning him the Pulitzer Prize in 1944. Citizens and soldiers alike across the nation mourned his loss when, on April 18th of 1945, he was killed by a Japanese sniper on the island of Ieshima. It would be a number of years, though, before this national cemetery would become the awe-inspiring sight that we know today. Its first graves were marked with white wooden crosses bearing the Star of David, but these were only ever meant to be temporary. They began to be replaced by the flat granite markers spread throughout the cemetery today in 1951. More recently, in 2015, another $25 million would be allotted for improvements, maintenance, and expansion of the cemetery. Among other things, this enabled the construction of new columbariums, making space for nearly 7,000 more heroes. Now this national cemetery, spanning more than 112 acres, has become the final resting place for more than 53,000 people. Of all of the headstones here in the National Cemetery, and there are some pretty honorable headstones to check out, this is definitely the top of the list for us. FlCrafters and I both have a history that stretches back to where we met, at Blunt Island in Jacksonville, Florida. One of the ships in our program was named after Herbert Pillalow, who was a Medal of Honor recipient, and this is a pretty humbling experience to be here. Did you get a chance to go on this ship while we were there at Blunt Island?
Many times.
Did you enjoy your time on it?
I did, and I didn't know he was here until I found him here.
And she made a point of showing us this headstone, and I am glad we did, because this is definitely a high point of this tour through the National Cemetery today. Thanks, FlCrafters. I would like to share with you the incredible tale told by the Medal of Honor citation for Herbert Pillalow for action on September 17th of 1951 during the Korean War. PFC Pillalow, a member of Company C, distinguished himself by conspicuous gallantry and outstanding courage above and beyond the call of duty in action against the enemy. The enemy sent wave after wave of fanatical troops against his platoon, which held a key terrain feature on Heartbreak Ridge. Valiantly defending its position, the unit repulsed each attack until ammunition became practically exhausted, and it was ordered to withdraw to a new position. Voluntarily remaining behind to cover the withdrawal, PFC Pillalow fired his automatic weapon into the ranks of the assailants, threw all his grenades, and, with ammunition exhausted, closed with the foe in hand-to-hand combat, courageously fighting with his trench knife and bare fists until finally overcome and mortally wounded. When the position was subsequently retaken, more than 40 enemy dead were counted in the area he had so valiantly defended. His heroic devotion to duty, indomitable fighting spirit, and gallant self-sacrifice reflect the highest credit on himself, the infantry, and the U.S. Army. And as I mentioned before, this is only the tip of the iceberg for the thousands upon thousands of untold tales represented here in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, many of which are represented here at the Court of Honor, which is flanked on each side of the staircase with the Courts of the Missing, honoring American service members who went missing in action or were lost at sea in the Pacific. There are a total of 8 of these courts, flanking either side of the grand staircase leading up to the feet of the Lady of Columbia. Inscribed on the surface of these white stone tablets are the names of more than 18,000 who went missing in the Pacific and more than 8,000 who went missing in Korea. Within the Court of Honor itself, on either side of the Lady of Columbia, can be found a depiction of the island-hopping campaign of World War II. The maps and the information provided tell the strategy of the Allies in the Pacific theater as they strategically captured key islands across the Pacific. Each represents a hard-fought battle and the end of the story of many service members as the Allies continued to gradually advance toward the Japanese mainland. As each island was taken one by one, American soldiers planted their flags in scorched earth, cutting off Japanese supply lines. This campaign eventually allowed the United States to gain control of the Pacific, minimizing casualties and maximizing gains. It is an integral part of the military history of anyone who has ever put on the uniform. Okay, that covers our tour of the National Cemetery here in Oahu, a place that really makes you catch your breath and appreciate all of the sacrifice that has gone through the years to keep our country free as it is. I've really enjoyed this walking tour to the point where I'd have to say this is probably my favorite spot I've visited here in Hawaii. What do you think?
It's probably the most beautiful spot I've ever visited.
I know when you come to Hawaii, you're going to be targeting GC23, the oldest, and Cache Across America, because of course you will. But try and carve away some time to come see the Punchbowl National Cemetery for yourself. Until then, make sure to like this video, subscribe, stay tuned for updates, and we'll see you out on the trails.